It's recording. Right, let me ask you then, guys. Do you remember what is a rate? No ideas? Can't remember what rate is. It's got to do with measurements, yeah. Just a measurement, but go on, say it again. Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I like that. Should we say that again? Two related quantities in different units. I like that because we get in the idea that we've got the ratio, we're working with our ratios still, and we're dealing with different units, which is also really important for us. I'm just going to make my pen a bit different. Okay, so that's great. So a ratio between related quantities in different units. All right. So do you remember what kind of rates we've looked at? Speed was one, yeah. Well, distance was one of those related quantities. So speed was the relationship between which quantities? Distance and, well, distance is measured in miles, so we had a different quantity. So we had distance, which could be measured in miles or kilometers or meters, and then there was another unit, another quantity of a different measurement, time, wasn't it? Yeah. So speed was a relationship between distance and time. Okay. Did we do any others? Relationship between. We started off looking at units of measurement, didn't we? Where we had to convert from, let's say, centimeters to meters or meters to miles, even that kind of stuff. Do you remember doing that? Yeah. And then the last thing we've looked at, and we'll go through all this on other slides. The last thing we looked at has been that you've been working on with Burnside's billions. Well, it was rates, but everything's a rate. But rate with what? What were the measuring thing? What were we measuring or counting? Pardon? I think you were right. Did you say currencies? Yeah, that's it. We were looking at different currencies, weren't we? Swapping from one currency to another, exchange rates. Okay, let's have a look then. What do we mean by unitary method? So Sienna kind of gave us good with unitary. What do we mean by unitary? One. So we can consider we're talking about one, or one of, or a unit. So what do you think about the unitary method was? So might be a bit more difficult. So that's where we compare um, how many of one unit is equal to, that's not a very good word to use, how many of, I'm going to say, how many of a unit measurement is equal to a single unit of another. Now, that's probably not as clear as I probably could have done it. Does that make sense though, guys? So when we talked about speed, for instance, that was a big one. What was the measurement we always wanted in as our single unit of? So we wanted one measurement of, what was it, the distance or the time? Do you remember? It wasn't the distance, no. 50 that. It was the time, wasn't it? Because in speed, we want to know how far we travel in 1 hour, yeah? Remember that? So we've got more slides we'll talk about. So the third one, what topics have we been using unit ratios in? Well, we've already kind of talked about that. So we have converted units of measurement. All right. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was units of speed. And the third thing that we did was exchange rates, okay, in currencies. So they're the three things that we've basically studied and used these rates for. Do you remember doing those? Any questions on anything of that at the moment? Or is that all good? Is that reminding you what we've been doing? Okay, so these are the things that I'm going to be assessing what level you've reached for this topic on Wednesday, right, in our short assessment. So let's go on to the first thing then, all right, which is our units of measurement. Now, do you remember what the imperial and metric measurements meant? Well, actually, kilograms is metric. An imperial example would be pounds. So we would have, that would be for, should we say weight? Probably should be mass according to our science teachers. But what about if we had a distance? So does anyone remember what a metric or imperial distance would be? So for instance, I would say like go on. Okay, is that metric or imperial? Nope. It's metric, centimeters. Okay. Anyone know what an equivalent measurement in imperial would be? So if you're measuring a few centimeters, it's only a short amount, a small length, what would be the equivalent that you would do in imperial? Does anyone know? You do without really knowing, but I would go with inches. Yeah. Okay. And for instance, with distance, we know we do a few more of these. So we've got centimeters, we've got meters, we've got kilometers. All right. What would measurements be in imperial? So we've got inches, we've got feet, yards, and miles. Yeah. Which ones do you lot use most often, guys? Metric or imperial, do you think? You would use imperial, yeah? It's just a question. There's no right or wrong answer. I was like, what do you guys use? So if I asked you to measure something for me, what would you tell me? Would you say, oh, it's 5 inches, or would you tell me it was 10 centimeters? Sometimes people use a mixture of two, you know. Do you know where the imperial? Can you remember where the imperial ones came from and why they're a bit harder to use? Well, yeah, that was it. Did you say kings, queens? Yeah. Where do you think the measurement for feet came from? Or someone's foot? Yeah, someone had a foot that was that big. They decided that was how they would measure. And things like yards and feet, they changed depending on who the king or the queen was at the time, because the king or the queen wanted it to be based on their measurements. So inches are like the end of your thumb, right? So metric had nothing to do with people. It was like a scientifically done one. So metric are a much easier ones to work on, work with, because it's a lot nicer numbers, right? But you'll probably do that more in the future. All right, so why do we want to convert from one to another? So for instance, if I said to you, we've got 1 inch is the same thing as how many centimeters? Do you know? Doesn't matter if you don't.
It's the same as like 3 or 4 centimeters.
Say that again. So, how many inches?
An inch is the same as like 3 or 4 centimeters.
Not quite. It's actually 2.5 roughly. Okay. So, why do we want to convert between them then? Any ideas? Well,
How much centimeters are in an inch?
yeah, but why would you want to? And I think it comes down to the fact that, like I asked you before, people work in different measurements. So let's say you get some instructions to make something, and the measurements are all in inches, but you want to work in centimeters. We need to be able to convert one to the other. Yeah. Some people work in feet, some people work in meters. If you're in Europe, you tend to work in the metric units. If you went from Europe to America, you'd probably end up working in imperial. Okay, so we want to be able to convert from one to the other. So just to remind you guys, because there are other videos out there that you can go back to, we could then write that as our ratio. 1, so remember we've got inches, 1 inch, and we've got centimeters is 2.5. So if I then wanted to say how many centimeters is 10 inches, would anyone be able to tell me? What would we do? How would I figure out how many centimeters I would get if I had 10 inches? If I know that 1 inch is 2.5 centimeters.
Multiply 2.5 by 2.5.
I wouldn't multiply by 2.5, no, but I would multiply by something.
Multiply by 10.
I'd multiply by 10, wouldn't I? Because if I've got 10 lots of 1 inch, I should have 10 lots of 2.5 centimeters. So I do 2.5 multiplied by 10 is 25. So then I know that 10 inches is equal to 25 centimeters. Okay, so we did conversions like that. So as long as you know the initial kind of conversion here, you can work out others. Okay. Marley says that's good. Is that good, Marley? Okay. A little bit. So there's lots of things we could work out. We don't really have time to go through it all now. You can look back at the... Do you remember those worksheets I gave you that at the top of the worksheet had lots of different conversions that you had to use? Remember those ones? Yeah, go back and check them. Right, moving on then. Speed calculation. So we've already said that speed is a relationship between distance and time. Okay? Okay, so for instance, what are the units of speed that we normally use? So we went through a whole sheet where we converted lots of different ones, but we did say that there are some that we would normally use. What would they be? Yeah, so we would have miles per hour. Okay, call that mph. And kilometers per hour. Okay, so kilometers per hour. Write it slightly differently. It's weird, don't we? There's other ones that we use. Probably see in science more. Maybe meters per second. We would also use meters per second. We don't tend to do... could I ask you why not miles per second very often?
That's pretty, it might be a little faster.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? Well, you did something important there, Luke. Your assumption. And then I've got meters per hour. Let's have a look. So I don't know why there's a yellow line there. I don't know whether you can see it. No, it just seems to be there. I've got meters per hour. Can you see a yellow line? Oh, it's gone now. There you go. Can you understand why I would do meters and seconds, but not meters per hour? And I think you said something, Luke, like you don't tend to run so many miles per second. So it's a relationship between two appropriate measurements, isn't it? If I'm going to travel miles, I'm probably going to take hours, yeah? Even cars will do a number of miles in an hour. They don't do lots of miles in a second. And the same thing, when we have meters per hour, that would be probably a huge, big number. If I was in a car, I would do thousands of meters per hour. So it doesn't make sense to compare quite a small unit of distance with a big unit of time. Do you remember doing that? So we have what's appropriate. So we have quite a big unit of distance and a big unit of time together. Or we have a small unit of distance and a small unit of time. Okay. Yes, Luke, you raised a hand. It's videoing. Yeah, go for it. All right, guys. So what would I be measuring if I did a speed in a miles per hour? What kind of objects do you think I'd be measuring the speed of a car? Okay, car works. Kilometers per hour could be a car again, but could also be what else? A person. I have seen person being measured at walking or something. We don't tend to. We have things like cars, or I was thinking of a train or an airplane or something, yeah? the meters per second? When we're talking meters per second, we tend to talk about someone walking or running, yeah? Okay. All right. So the unit that we already talked about then, this is a big one for the unit ratio, because what we have is we have our distance and time ratio. So if I said to you, we do 200 kilometers in 4 hours, what would the speed be? Anyone remember? What do we do? We don't in this case, no. That's the same thing, isn't it? Although we don't use the word times. We want our unit ratio, so the unit must be the time, yeah? But we've got 4 hours and I want a speed to be in 1 hour. So what do? I don't multiply, I actually divide by 4. Because I only want 1 hour. I've done 4 hours, I only want 1. So that means I need to divide the 200 into the 4 as well. Because remember, I drew a diagram before where I said if this was 200 kilometers and I split it into 4 sections, that would be 4 hours in total. So each one would be 1 hour. So if I split 200 into 4 sections, each section is going to be 50 kilometers, yeah? So that means my 1 hour would be 50 kilometers. So my speed would be 50 kilometers per hour. Okay, so we need our unit. That's the unit that we need, the time. All right, do you remember doing that? Everyone good with that? Any questions? You remember doing those? We're almost out of time, but that's all right. I've got 10 minutes to talk about the last thing. Any questions on that? No? Okay. The final thing then, the currency exchange. All right. So why do we use a unitary method? So let's talk about, I know at the moment that one Bermudian dollar is about 0.8121 Great British pounds. All right. Now, do I get more dollars or more pounds? So if one Bermudian dollar is worth that many pounds, so what do I have more of if I have an amount of money? Would I have more dollars or more pounds? Dollars, yeah, because I have a whole dollar, but it's not worth a whole pound, so I would have whole dollars. So this is what you've been doing. So we've said, right, if let's say I have 2,000 Bermudian dollars, how many pounds would that be? So what we've been doing, just like the other things, we've been using ratios, okay? And this is our unit ratio. So I know if one Bermudian dollar is worth this many pounds, but I want to know 2,000, what do I need to do to work out how many pounds that would be? Why? Why?
Multiply the Great British pounds by 2,000 Bermudian dollars.
Because?
Because Bermudian dollar is well, if you transfer one Bermudian dollar to British currency, you're gonna get 81 cents. So see how much you need to
Yeah, yeah, that's. I mean, he's right, isn't he? So, do you remember we used a special couple of words when we started with ratio? So, ratio is a good way to think about it. Is for every $1 Bermudian, I get 0.81 British pounds. Okay, so for every $1, I get that many pounds. And how many dollars do I get? 2,000. Okay, so for every one of those, I must get that. So if I've got 2,000 of them, I must have 2,000 lots of 0.8121 pounds. Yeah, so that's what we did. So we multiplied by 2,000. Can someone do that for me on their calculator? This is what you were doing with the bit with the Burnside's billions.
It's 1,620.
1,620.
24.2.
4.2. Okay. All right. So we did that. 1,624.2. Now, just a little check. I should have more dollars than I do pounds, which is good. If I ended up with more pounds, that would be something wrong. Okay. Do you remember doing that? All right. Now, here's the little extension bit. Right. If I know that one Bermudian dollar is equal to 0.8121 Great British pounds, how can I work out the other way? So let's say I have pounds, okay? Let's say I have 400 Great British pounds, and I want to know how many Bermudian dollars that would be. Anyone have an idea how to do it? Well, what I would want to try and do to first off, which is what I guess you were trying to do, is if I could work out the unit ratio the other way, that would be great. So I want one British pound and to figure out how to get that many dollars. So what do I do to get from 0.8121 to 1? Any ideas? Well, I guess you could. There's an easier way, I guess.
I guess if $1 equals 0.8121,
Yeah.
then you can add.
We're not going to add. We're not going to add anything. That does a different thing. We're going to. Do you remember with ratios we have to maintain the same proportion that we called, so we always multiply or divide. So guys, a little trick: if you want to get from a number to 1, you actually divide by itself. Okay, divide by itself. So if I divide 1 by 0.8121, what do I get? Can you tell me if I do 1 divided by 0.8121? Can you tell me? You working it out for me? I'm going to run out of time. Come on, calculators. What have you got? What's 1 divided by 0.8121? Yeah, that's good. 1.23, should we say 1.4? Okay, and then how do I use that to get my £400? I can then go from 1 to 400. We have to multiply by. So I'm now, go on, 400, yeah, I think. So now I have the unit rate, but the other way round, guys. Do you see that? Compared to this one, I now have the unit rate, but going the other way. So now I can multiply by 400. So I've got that number multiplied by 400. And if I do that, I get 492.55 Bermudian dollars. So this was kind of the extension bit that you've been kind of working on with converting the units. If you don't have the right rate, you get it the other way round. Okay, so that's kind of like the harder end of your questions. Right, so I think, what will the assessment be like? So, like I've said, what did I say? Probably about 15 to 16 questions. All right. It's going to be measurements. It's going to be speed calculations, and it's going to be exchange rates. Okay. You're going to be using unit ratios, and that's basically it. Okay. I'm probably going to do it on Edpuzzle. Now I've only got about 30 seconds, so if we switch off, that's it. So that's what you're expecting on Wednesday. Use tomorrow to revise. Ask me any questions if you need to.